I was thinking about the political campaign and the fact that Joe Biden has just been nominated. And I know there may be kids or some of the youth who have been taught certain things about our political system. They may be even people in school that get certain lessons about our political system. And sometimes they see a deviation between how it actually operates um, versus what they were taught and what is implied, especially if you're watching something like CNN or mainstream media and the way that they talk about the pageantry of all of this stuff. I want to go into the reality of it, though. What is politics really like, especially from the standpoint of primaries and what you're about to see take place as it goes into the election? If this is your first go round, maybe if this is your second, you're going to hear what I say. You're not going to like it, but you're going to find that each and every word that I say is absolutely and entirely true. Joe Biden is already screwing you over, if not, has already done so months ago. And as you move into the next phase of this campaign, anything that you thought you were promised is now up for grabs. The entire point, the goal at this point, is beating Trump. Anything that I've talked about policy is secondary to the fact of beating Trump. It's the reason why the pageant that these guys have, walking around, inhaling, inebriating the fog of their own self-importance and hubris, they can do that because at this point, the only other competitor that was in the race is out. And you have nowhere else to go. And so you can sit there and watch as they parade one Republican after the next and then give AOC just the role of introducing Sanders. You can see that while they give Sanders his own role for the very first night. But basically, everybody else that's coming on is, we got to beat Trump. We got to beat Trump. The world ended the moment that Trump took place. Put us back in. We'll get it fixed. Radical centrism. And nobody knows what that means. And it basically is just 0.1% of the population that is fantastically rich of a particular class. You have one political designation that they look at, and then you find somebody in Congress that has the opposing. Never mind the fact that the opposing point of view has the overwhelming majority of the country, and that is a prevailing point of view. If you ask people, separation from party and everything else, what do you want in the world? What do you need in the world? What are the things that you're desperate for? What are you out there fighting and gyrating out in the streets for when you have the threat of being flung out of your home, the threat of not being able to feed yourself or your kid? What do you need? When you ask people in those terms, the left is not the extremes. The left is the norm. What becomes the extreme is that 1% point of view that is in Congress, that has a media screaming at you, that is, we're the moderates. No such thing. Let's take a look, or let's take a listen for the moment at how Obama's campaign went. And I'm going to show you how Biden's campaign is going and will continue to go. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. Let's go back in time for a moment. Obama argues against the individual mandate in regards to the healthcare plan that he's coming up with. Him and Clinton had basically little to no daylight between the two. In real terms, Hillary Clinton was more hawkish. But basically, you had two people, both Democrats. Clinton was far more accepted by the establishment. Clinton was far more accepted by African Americans because we didn't believe that a black person could win. And by the same token, though, the differences between the candidates and the political moment. George Bush had just finished a disastrous term. The Democrats at this point is saying, we're different than Bush, and we're going to have something fundamentally different. Obama argues hope and change. Nobody knows what it means. It feels euphoric and expansive. He's black. He's energetic. There's a magnetism around him. He's young. Oh, Obama in him. And Clinton, one of the most hated candidates in the history of the party, had her establishment status as being the thing to which she was basically arguing on. But when you get into policy stuff, basically these two people are relatively the same. What happened? They found argues or things they can argue about. Obama called her a liar. Obama called her basically fake, and even went so far as to push that the individual mandate would be a boon and a benefit to corporations who would love the fact that Hillary Clinton is putting through a healthcare plan like that because they'll be able to benefit off that individual mandate. Obama said, I am against the individual mandate. And you can find multiple videos out here with him attacking Hillary Clinton for trying to push so. The punishment of Wall Street, because if you remember, this was right after the crash. And Obama, I'm going to stick it to Wall Street. You also had this thing where wishy-washy on issues of war and Bush's war crimes. He even gave a speech on righteous war, if I remember it correctly, after getting the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, what happened in real terms? In real terms, documents showed that Obama was working with Citigroup, who basically chose his cabinet. So for all of those days he's out there ragging his fists to Wall Street, the people who are behind his campaign are those same people, which is the reason that those people didn't necessarily get prosecuted, and he threw his body on those Wall Street people in order to protect them while letting homeowners go bust. You also have this thing of public option feints every so often, but again, nothing in real terms. The moment that Hillary Clinton is out of it, well, now we can, remodel this campaign. We can change this up. We can have a new day in America. The media looks at this and says, this is the tack back. People who are young in politics are like, what? A tack back? Media says, yes, it's the sexy move where the politician basically betrays the base that they needed to get in order to get into the process in the first place. Basically, it's the maneuver that they expect, they wait for, where all of these things that they were proving or agreeing with from the standpoint of the base goes up in smoke. And now you run the campaign that you want to run against your opponent, with the added bonus that your people who were there for you, that were energized, that was like, yes, hope and change. That's what I want. That's what I need. I'm desperate for the hope and change. He's black. He's, of course, going to be different. His identity alone is going to force him and compel him to take actions that are in the interests of people who look like him. They were shocked as shit when that didn't happen. And basically what did happen is what always happens. One on one. And when you line up and narrow up, the things that the person was promised before get sucked away in regards to whatever the fight these two people have. Which means that by the time the person becomes president, you forget often about what they promised. And you are now stuck with a person who you have no leverage to move, to motivate, to maneuver, or anything else. And until 4 years later, where they would then come back and say, hey, let's do this again. And the same politics will play out. Elizabeth Warren in 2018 or 2019 did the same thing, by the way. She just did it poorly. When she was pushing for Medicare for all, she had no idea. You can look at I think it was Washington Post, that they didn't have any plan on actually introducing any kind of plan for Medicare for all. They just stuck with Bernie. And they thought they could say, I'm with Bernie. And when it got down to this notion of, are you going to have a tax? Sanders says, yes, of course, you got to have a tax to make that work. She didn't want to say it. Her tack back would have been exactly what they were doing back with Obama era. That basically after pushing for policy for all of this time, the moment that you get into the general, then you give it a new plan, a new spin. You walk it back. You maybe even change the name of it. You have all of these ideas part of it that you can give it away because you weren't necessarily all that for it in the first place. You were using it for political casting. Even though whatever you come up with, you still may call it Medicare for all, despite the fact that it is not Medicare for all. This is how politics works. This is the language that they use. The reason why I'm so fanatical about policy and specifics in regards to what are you actually trying to do in a political thing, not necessarily giving me the flowery rhetoric about it. I don't care about the flowery rhetoric. I want to know what you're trying to do in order to solve this or that problem. Until people get to that point where that's where they flex on, that's where they stand on, then language can be used in place of actually doing something. A black face, a trans person, a handicapped person can be used in lieu of actually getting anything real accomplished. That's where we're at in our politics. Everything I just say here is true. That's not sexy. It's not great. Yes, you're being taken advantage of. You can be taken advantage of because you allow it. You incentivize it by basically going through with that process and voting for a person, not for the issues of policy, but entirely because of who they're not. 40 years this has been going on. And it's been going on long enough where you could basically even call the particular parts of it. The moment that Joe Biden is running one-on-one against Donald Trump, all the things that you remember in the primary, all the fights, all the things that he had to say, wouldn't matter a hill of beans. Because at that point, you think that man is an ogre, he needs to be stopped, And whatever I need to do, including giving up any notion of who I am objectively in regards to what I want. Meaning, it doesn't matter that 88% of Democrats support Medicare for all. It is the candidate's responsibility to appropriate that with that much support, if indeed this is a representative government. If indeed the goal is to organize or to coalesce around policy and party ideas that organically bring people of that party together, then it is unconscionable that Donald Trump is supposedly the apocalypse, but the Democratic Party is being so purist that they're not willing to accept a policy that the overwhelming majority of not just Democrats, but the American public supports. That's astonishing. And yet that's where we are. The manipulation, the lie, the changeover, and then the distraction, which is the election itself. And so when he gets in office, all of your leverage goes up in smoke. And the reality of it is that your leverage should have been pressed during the election, the entire time during that election, with the notion that you don't get our votes if you don't get acquiesce to American policy that the public wants. If he wins or if he loses, it is up to him. It is the candidate's responsibility to get those votes. And the moment that it made clear that this is our litmus test, this is what we need because we're desperate for X. And either you accept it or you don't, but here's where we stand. They can try you and they can lose. And you will gain a certain degree of legitimacy in the political space just by being something other than a doormat or a battered spouse. But that's your path out. Anything else is acquiescing to 40, 50 years of the exact same strategy that basically gets you to give up exactly what you want for nothing real in return. Right now, Joe Biden, before even getting into the point where he is now, was very clear. Nothing's going to change. He's in a room full of donors, right? That's where the real conversations take place. He didn't tell us that. He wasn't telling us that at all. He's telling his donors. Nothing fundamentally will change if I get elected. Kamala Harris comes into this. Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Love her. Love her. Now, do you think the interests of Wall Street and Silicon Valley, or for that matter, the people who are the donors that Joe Biden has given his money to, is in line with the interests of the campaign that you just saw run where socialists nearly ran away with it? That the entirety of the Democratic Party and everything that they represent and their oligarchs that are putting money in their G-strings collapsed around stopping Sanders. And Sanders didn't have the heart, didn't have the will, and maybe, honestly, might have just been tired at this point since he's been running for like 8 years to push back. This is not a big tent. You have dollars or pitchforks, and you have a corporate oligarchy that is appropriated at this point both parties and is using both parties to take on policy that is in its interest. The media basically are rich and have the same priorities as the political parties at the end of the day, in which case the world that they present to you, the narrative that they present to you, is one of their liking, not necessarily one of our reality. The difference and discrepancies between those things is kind of the space where you see how this country breaks down. You have all the money in the world to ensure that each and every person in this country, meaning all the money and technology, the technical acumen, to ensure that there's nobody on this planet that's hungry, let alone anybody in this country that's hungry. That you don't have a situation where people are living on the street, that each and every person can have health care. All those things are achievable, even within the context of this corrupt capitalistic system. But your oligarchical space that sits above your political space and funds and funnels money to the point where 90% of these guys get elected, determining by the side who has the most cash. That creates certain incentives in your world, in your space, that governs your Democratic Party every bit as much as your Republican Party. When you make an argument and have somebody make that argument that basically the left's policies, those policies that the public overwhelmingly agreed with during the election, are the extremes, then it gets you your warped point of view and where you're coming from in regards to the way you're looking at the world. Moderate, in this case, is just a class distinction that tries to find some kind of political casting around it. It's not moderate. It's not anything. Does the policy work or not? Yeah or nay? That's all that matters. This other nonsense about trying to categorize it between these ideas. No. Does it work or not? Yay, nay. Do you agree with this? Yay or nay? The extremes are the radical partisans that refuse to appropriate policies in a representative government that the overwhelming majority of the public support, even if that means losing to a man who they're trying to say is the walking apocalypse. That's the part that's appalling. That's the part that's extreme and radical and that's shocking when you actually have to deal with it in real terms. And they can't necessarily explain to you in rational terms on how you avoid and not appropriate a party that has 88% on policy, 88% Democratic support. And the person you choose lied about it, and the other person that helped you get over the finish line also lied about it and got busted for it and fell apart immediately after. These are our politics. They do this for the obvious reason that it's a rational action if you can get away with it. And if you have a situation where you can get lefties to basically give it all away year after year after year because they are terrified of the Republican winning, missing the point that Republicans still win. And that in the process of Republicans still winning, even when their Democrat wins, it doesn't necessarily do anything to the real tangible world in a way that would push back on something that might have taken place in the Republican Party. It just instantiates it. It instantiates it because basically, again, they're paid by the same people. So regardless of what they tell you, ultimately the agenda, whether it's going at 60 miles an hour or whether it's going at 90, is practically the same. Right now, Joe Biden, right here, this is the week. Right here. All right. It's true that Joe Biden has been nominated for the president on the most left-wing platform in many years, but his campaign is already distancing himself from the platform. And by the way, nobody uses that platform. Nobody. It's a showpiece. And in this showpiece, they didn't even want to put in Medicare for all in the showpiece. As Anita Chavez writes in The Intercept, Biden proposed a 100-day moratorium on deportation of immigrants residing in the United States, has already mysteriously vanished. A promise to end fossil fuel subsidies has already gone missing. And campaign insiders are already assuring corrupt big medical swindlers that the promise to create a kind of public option on Obamacare exchanges was a lie. Here's the catch. What are you going to do about it? It's Biden. It's Trump. What are you going to do? Biden is going to tell you, go vote for somebody else. It doesn't matter to him that he lied. None of it is going to matter. At the point where it's between you and Trump, you have now been trapped by this particular gamesmanship that takes place in politics. Corralling your voters to the point where those voters believe in something and then find out after the fact that that person doesn't believe it at all. You've been lied to, but now it's mano a mano, and so you can forget about the fact that you've been lied to until he gets in office and you find how depraved the lie was. He's not even going to fight for it. What he will do is say the Republicans are stopping him from doing it. The fight that you would have had to change Obamacare, that Republicans voted against like 40 times, would have been same, if not similar to the fight that you would have had to just try to implement Medicare for all in the first place. Look, your politics, your parties, they are scamming you, and they're doing this for votes. The honest-to-God political system that you should have is one where you advocate and push for a particular policy and a party appropriates it or not. The Democratic Party has inverted its politics. So instead of having a base that pushes and that controls the outcome and the perspective of what the party ends up with, you have it inverted, where the people, blacks, Hispanics, poor, are so terrified or have gotten to the point where they don't even see the point of engaging in a political process, so they just leave, that they're stuck in this quagmire of realizing that he lied to me again, but I have to vote for him anyway. How dispiriting and battered wife of the left that they take on. Missing the point that by accepting that, you've basically allowed the party to move further and further and further to the right because any notion of accountability was bled out of the political process as you acquiesce to this nonsense contest that they continuously prop up as if it was a real thing. Sanders is out of it. You're stuck with Biden and whatever Biden does. And if Donald Trump really is a monster, if he really is the apocalypse, and if you accept their premise, then I suppose Joe Biden can say anything and do anything he wants. He can say, I'm going to privatize Social Security. Fuck it. What are you going to do? He can say, I am going to rub my ball sack upon every voter on the left that goes in to pull the lever for me. And you're going to thank me as you walk out and shake my hand. And they would say, Sam Cedar, this is what I must bear. And they will go do it. I am saying that if you want a different world where this nonsense stops, you must leave and understand that you are not them. I mean, for fuck's sake, they have Republicans parading all across the stadium, attacking the left. You are something fundamentally different that needs to be able to stand under this notion of policy where you push on the political space that they acquiesce to your wants and the millions of people like you, or they lose. And under those guidelines, the moment that you can make the case that says, look, the overwhelming majority of the American public agrees with this, you chose to take another direction where you were working in the best interests, I suspect, of your donors. That 0.1% of people who dump tons of money into your lap in your G-string and rub credit card through your ass cheeks. So no, you didn't get our votes. You didn't earn our votes. That has to be the position. Otherwise, the scam will continue ad infinitum. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. I think this one went slightly long. All right, guys. I'll talk to you guys in a few. Bye-bye.